Way in the corner, both sides.
Okay, thought power. Om. Om Sahanā-Vavatu Sahanā Bhunaktu Saha Vīryam Karavā-vahai Tejas Vinā Vadhīta Mastu Vidvishā-Vahai. Om Shānti Shānti Shāntihi. On below Guru Sivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all of the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai Hari Om Tat Sat. And for anyone who is joining this morning online and noticing that we're ahead of where you thought we would be, we put a note there also. We're preparing for summer and Swami's travels, and also it's hot here by 8 a.m. these days. So we moved satsang a little bit earlier. We're starting at 5:30 in the morning, our time. Okay, we were talking about yesterday thinning out thoughts, like thinning out plants. And why do we thin out plants? So they do it in the vineyards over here. All right, you know.
So the good plants get all the nutrition and water and flourish.
That's it. So that's why we thin out thoughts. And the practice is really the same. It's what's being called for, and recognize we're coming from a place where it's said on average, the worldly mind, 70,000 thoughts a day, like this. So a lot to thin out. It's really, when we've worked at swaths of some of the negative thinking, and we've talked about mantra a lot, and mantra is a practice that helps to reduce and the entire system of yoga, asanas, pranayama, pratyahara, these all work to help to slow down the thoughts. Just breath itself, for everyone joining us, just breath itself, it's important to recognize the connection between breath and thought, and this is something that Swami Sivananda was speaking of just a few days ago here, is the link between breath and thought. And we just practiced a very short Kapalabhati, and then we held the breath for 30 seconds. That's all we did. And got to see that in that kumbhak, when we're holding the breath, that the thoughts stop. And so by these practices, the thoughts are slowed down enough to give us the opportunity to observe the thoughts and to pull out, to close the door to some, to pull some out. And really, the visualization of pulling them out is a good one. Really, it is. We're when we work with retreats, positive thinking retreats, and we haven't done for a while, and I believe when we're traveling, we'll be able to offer some of this. We have a nice one online. But when we're working with that, we're given the vision of working with thoughts as a gardener works in the garden. Right? Which is to fertilize the beneficial thoughts, to water them and fertilize them, and to weed out the ones that are non-beneficial, the worldly thoughts, the negative, the evil thoughts, the judgmental thoughts, etc. And of course, a good gardener is aware of the garden, and is watching out over the garden, and has established a relationship with the garden. A good gardener does not take the garden to be himself or herself. Right? And they have a dispassionate view towards the garden. Yes, they love the plants and all of this, but dispassionate. In other words, the weeds they don't allow to take over. Yeah? And so too wants to be the gardener of the mind. So thinning out. Okay, and then here's a good one. Let's see if we remember this. Thought control by Napoleon's method. When you think on one subject, do not allow other thoughts to enter. When you think of a rose, think of different kinds of roses only. Do not allow other thoughts to enter. When you think of mercy, think of mercy and mercy only. And this is Hari specifically, and really Shivadas as well. Compassion. You have to have contemplation and compassion. You have to bring it in. We have to bring it in. There has to be a genuine caring for others in order to be free of otherness.
Exactly.
A real, genuine caring of others for there to be freedom from otherness. And so you should consider mercy, compassion like this. And you should take time to really contemplate it, to sit and say, this is what I'm going to think about. You can read something that's inspiring first, take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and practice this Napoleon's method. It's a very good practice for everyone. It helps you to see the power you have over the thoughts, but it also helps to get beneficial grooves, additional beneficial grooves coming into alignment. And one would imagine he's calling it Napoleon's method because this is the way that Napoleon thought, and he recognizes that. So wouldn't allow thoughts other than the subject that wanted to be addressed to enter. And so a doubt comes in the mind. I don't know if it's beneficial. What do I get of this? Whatever the thought is, don't allow it. Stop. We're thinking about compassion right now. We're thinking about mercy right now. We're thinking about apples right now, and that's fine too for practice. Napoleon controlled his thoughts in this manner. When I want to think of things more pleasant, I close the cupboards of my mind, revealing the more unpleasant things of life, and open up the cupboards containing the more pleasant thoughts. If I want to sleep, I close up the cupboards of mind. So he's speaking of the Napoleon attitude. When I went to sleep, I just close it. The more you recognize that you're utilizing the mind, the more that we have the relationship with the mind where the mind works for us instead of the other way around, then sleep is never an issue. We'll move on. Arrest the recurrence of evil thoughts. Suppose the evil thoughts stay in your mind for 12 hours and recur every third day. If you can make them stay for 10 hours and recur once in a week by daily practice of concentration meditation, that is a decided improvement. If you continue your practice, the period of stay and recurrences will be gradually lessened. So even here we experience doubtful thoughts or we experience judgmental thoughts. This person who did something that we still harbor the idea they ruined my life or they did something to me, right? My mother, somebody that said something about me in the past. Specific. There's an idea that says they did something to me. It's deeply buried. Yeah? Sorry?
Gotta root it out.
So it's deeply buried to where, but it's not gone, to where still something will happen and it will trigger it. It'll bring it forward again. Right?
Which is a blessing, because then you can work through it.
Which is a blessing. And so if you recognize that there's a trigger and you recognize that something is bringing this thought that you want to be free of that was long since shouldn't be important, and it tends to again be reactionary, then recognize it, be aware of it, strong resolve, and watch the recurrence of it. The more it's watched, the more it doesn't recur. What does that mean? Watched as opposed to imbibed in. Does that make sense? Watched as opposed to contemplated. Does that make sense? The two? Swami Sivananda was talking the other day about being positive to the lower, and a misunderstanding of that. That doesn't mean being positive about lower thoughts. That means be positive to it. Don't let them take over the space. And in the same way, These recurring evil thoughts. What is he calling evil? Any material thought. What does that include? My God, it includes any thought about an other, Jivadas, and Hari and Hara, and all of us. It includes any thought about an other. You recognize that? Yeah, there's no other. There's myself, capital S self. There's God, however we relate. Yeah. There's no other. There's no other. But look at how a thought will enter the mind, and then you live for hours, even when you say, okay, I get it. I've done the work, I get it. I'm going to live it, I get it. Let's say, I get it, no other. The practical wisdom, step number 3, I'm really doing my best to practice that everything that comes to me, every experience coming to me, comes specifically for me from the hands of God. So I'm doing my best to practice it, right? Okay. But, yeah. So, but then does an evil thought enter? Evil thought, material thought. Thought of other. Thought of something random. This isn't for me. I don't deserve this. Yes? Someone did something wrong to me in the past, and that's why I didn't get that job. That's why I'm not at that other place.
We're supposed to.
Yeah. Oh.
In the learning
In the scheme of things, we get to see that. Yeah. But, okay. Just adding a little color around, suppose the evil thoughts stay in your mind for 12 hours. Or recur every third day. If you can make them stay, and they're bound to keep visiting, by the way, because this is the cycling of the gunas. But just because a cloud visits doesn't mean that you have to take it to be you. Just because a thought visits, you don't have to lose yourself to it eventually. Yes. Okay. And then he says, so practice. If you are daily practicing concentration and meditation, he separates the two, concentration and meditation, because we have Raja Yoga meditation, but we also have the concentration practices that he's been sharing with us. And in particular, concentration on virtues, concentration on compassion, etc. In particular for Raja Yoga, and really help to round out the psyche. Because finally, we have to expand. Some people would say movement from head to heart, but finally we have to expand in order to understand, in order to come home. As we were discussing last night, no question, Raja Yoga meditation is a great aid, absolutely great aid, because it helps to bring the insight back. It helps to bring the centeredness back, yes? Yeah, and it helps to prepare for the opening of the heart. Buddha is a great example. Buddha sat, but the meditation wasn't all of his practice. What was interesting, he sat for some 48 days, and he'd been in sadhana for 7 years, very, very committed, right? And then finally, okay, this is it. Enlightenment or I die, one or the other. And what came out of that was this absolute compassion, complete loss of self-interest, complete lack of self-interest, right? All that was motivating at that point. And you see, in the Buddha's case, that's where he started. Buddha never started the meditation in order to escape. He never started in order to get away. You understand that? The compassion, the seed of compassion was already there.
To serve.
The reason he did it was because he knew deep down that there was a cure for this suffering. What had resonated with him is everyone is suffering and there's no end to it. That's what had resonated with him. And why did he leave the wife and baby? He left not in order to get away, you see? He left in order to discover that which would free us from suffering.
Yes.
And so that's where it started, and that was the purpose of the meditation and everything else. And so when we come through the practice of meditation to begin to realize that this has to be shared, then meditation, contemplation, in particular contemplation on virtues, is essential. Oh, okay. Eventually, the evil thoughts will disappear altogether. And he says, and you can look, and we should all, everyone joining us online, etc., should be able to look. Compare your present state of mind with last year or the year before last, and you'll see your progress. The progress will be very slow in the beginning. It'll be difficult for you to gauge the growth and progress. And then a few more points here this morning. Give the wrong thought no concession. At first, a wrong thought enters the mind. Then you entertain a strong imagination. You take delight in dwelling on that wrong thought. And we've all had that experience. You give consent to its stay in the mind, and gradually the wrong thought, when it's not resisted, takes a strong hold in your mind. Then it becomes very difficult to drive it off. And the experience is, and we all have had our addictions, and the addictive tendencies are still here. And we're learning the only way to cure the addiction is to get the mind addicted to God. Is to see God, nothing but God, and for the mind to be glued to God. But you've seen how it happens, right? A thought enters. It says to you, I'm innocent, pay attention to me. I'm your friend. I'm going to give you some happiness today. Follow me. You haven't had a drink for a while, but you've been missing out. It'll say.
Stop doing that. I get it.
Yeah, right? It's
Sure, really surprised.
Whatever. Yeah. What about a little cocaine today?
It's been decades.
Yeah, let's go out and look for somebody to party with today, it'll say.
Let's escape.
But then it's more subtle as well.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can escape my duties today. So, wrong thought enters the mind. Then you entertain a strong imagination. Then you think about staying in bed late. It would feel really good to stay.
Even taking naps is unnecessary.
So you give it consent to stay in the mind. Do we recognize?
Yeah.
Yeah. And gradually the wrong thought, when it is not resisted, takes a strong hold in the mind. So he says, give it no concession. When you recognize it, nip the bad thought in its bud. There's an old saying, nip it in the bud.
Oh, yes.
Just as you close your door or gate when a dog or an ass, he's speaking of the donkey character, tries to come in. It's more uniquely Indian, I suppose. So also close your mind before any evil thought can enter and produce an impression on your physical brain. You'll become wise soon and attain eternal infinite peace and bliss. Wipe out lust, greed, and egoism. And these continue to want to have a place. Entertain only, and Swami Sivananda would say sadhana has to be as long as we're in this body, because it's as if they have a life of their own. Yeah. And they continue to want to have a place. Egoism in particular, and the feelings about how people are supposed to see me, and they should understand me, and they should know who I am, and they should respect me, and they should give me my freedom.
Yes, I get it.
Something we see a lot of. So wipe out lust, greed, and egoism. Entertain only pure, holy thoughts. This is an uphill task, a difficult task. You'll have to practice it. You will succeed in your attempt after some time. And then he gives spiritual practice, and he speaks of something very interesting, which we will experience or have experienced. Your mind will sometimes shudder when evil thoughts enter your mind. If we experience shudder, like the very thought of it is disgusting.
Oh, yeah.
But the thought of it has come.
Right.
So he says that's a sign of spiritual progress. The fact that a thought that would have been entertained in the past is disgusting now.
Yeah.
So that drink, for example, if it came now, the mind would shudder. Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely.
What? Right.
God. So you're growing spiritually. You will be much tormented when you think of your evil actions committed in the past.
Say that one more time.
You will be much tormented when you think of your evil actions in the past. So if you take the time to think through what you're engaging in the past,
yes.
it brings so much forward. Tormented. This is also a sign of your spiritual upheaval. You will not repeat now the same actions. Your mind will tremble. Your body will quiver when a wrong thought of some evil action encourages or urges you to do the same act through the force of habit. So, sattvic supervisor.
Yeah. Doesn't benefit.
All memories, and he says, your body will quiver when a wrong thought urges you, etc. Continue your meditation, continue your sadhana with full vigor and earnestness. All memories of evil actions, all evil thoughts, all evil promptings of Satan, this is what we were talking about last night, and he said it right here, will die by themselves. You will be established in perfect purity and peace. We'll move on for those joining us online, but we had an interesting conversation about the devil, Satan, from a reading that we took last night. And we were comparing notes on the Christian view versus the Eastern traditions. And in a nutshell, we could say in a way very similar, and in another way apparently different. These tendencies, which are clearly not beneficial, that arise, the thoughts, ideas, desires, and tendencies that we come to see will lead us astray, have led us astray in the past, and will lead us astray if we do them now. At some point, it's so strange because we seem like we've done the work and we know that we must not do the thing or think about the thing, whatever the thing is. But still the thought comes. It is as if there is a force, and we had this conversation, is it stronger than God? No, it's actually of God, which is a little freaky from some perspective to consider. But there is a force to them.
Yeah.
There is a force to them, and there seems to be a life to them. In other words, they seem to want to find crevices to come into and to camp out in, to put down their stake in base camp and say, okay, if you give me a little room, I will take over more of this space. There seems to be a real life to them. And so in the Christian tradition is the idea that Satan is outside of us as a living entity. But in the same way, if we look at Vedanta, we'll see these demonic thoughts are outside of us because we're not the thoughts, but they are camping out looking for a place to enter us, to corrupt the soul, as it were. And so in either case, we would say, okay, there is a force, and we better be on guard. And what we talked about a little bit last night, but it's not a person in terms of a person named Bill who lives across the street from me, because this force visits us in our own house. This is being our house. Comes and visits us in our own apartment and tries to get a room.
But Swami, that can be a blessing too, because it allows us to practice discernment.
It does.
Oh.
It does. If we take it as an opportunity and we don't follow it,
Yeah.
and we don't try to say it's only Bill, but we recognize that it's coming to visit Hari too.
Sorry, you gotta go home.
So,
Oh, God.
it says, in the beginning, all sorts of evil thoughts will arise in your mind as soon as you sit for meditation. Why does this happen during meditation when you attempt to entertain pure thoughts? Aspirants leave their spiritual practice of meditation on account of this. And we see people, particularly early on in meditation, that say, every time I sit for meditation, I have these terrible thoughts, and so I stopped. I met several that say that. And so, even so, the old evil habits try to attack you. Your enemy endeavors to resist you vehemently when you try to eject him out of your house. We were just talking. He says there's a law of resistance in nature, which we were just talking about. The old evil thoughts assert and say, "Oh man, do not be cruel. You have allowed us to stay in your mental factory from time immemorial. We have every right to abide here. We have helped you up to this time in all of your evil actions. Why do you want to oust us from your dwelling place? We will not vacate our abode." And he says, do not be discouraged. Go on with your practice of meditation, sadhana, regularly, and the evil thoughts will be thinned out. Eventually, they will all perish. Positive overcomes negative. This is the law of nature. But the resistance is required. We actually need the resistance. Just as a weightlifter has to have the resistance in order to gain physical strength, so the yogin has to have, the spiritual practitioner has to have resistance in order to gain purity. Yes? Oftentimes we'll talk with people, and I know joining us, our dear brothers and sisters that have had this experience that say, I was practicing and things were really good for a while, and then it wasn't so good. And so that's just resistance. It's just resistance. And so we experience the resistance. But what's the purpose of the resistance? We could have an idea that it's to make us fail or to give us discouragement, but that's also a limited idea, a false idea. If we look at it from a broad sense, we say it's to help us to be strong. It's to help us to recognize that I'm not there yet, but I'm on the path.
Next time it's a little less.
Yeah. In the Christian tradition, dark night of the soul, it's really the same. It's the same. We recognize there's this power, we recognize it, we feel it, call it God, call it universal power, call it conscience, or call it intuition, whatever we call it, we've touched it, we've come to relate to it, we feel like the practices, whatever spiritual practices we've adopted, they're sacrosanct, and then it's gone. But it's not actually gone, you see. We're having a different experience now.
It remains in seed form. Does it? So
it, referring to God or intuition or...
No, the opposite. The stuff that...
The opposite is you could say, you can relate to it so many different ways. One way is you could say everything here is God. You could say Bhranti, delusion, is also God.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm bound to experience different aspects, but different aspects of what?
Same.
Of God.
Yes.
And so I will experience upliftment. I will have spiritual experiences. I will have an experience of unity. And Peace Pilgrim, our beautiful, simple saint, says everyone on the path will have some unity experience. It won't last. Right? But everyone will have the experience, and it's encouragement. But then when it stops, it's like, what happened? What am I doing wrong? And it's not that we're doing something wrong, and this is what Swami Sivananda is sharing here. It is that it's resistance, and the resistance has to be there in order to in order to live in a way that we come into the light and we stay in the light.
Longer and longer.
And that force will only last as long as it needs to. So as long as we're experiencing difficulties, it's because we need to experience difficulties.
Yes. So true.
Right?
We realize that.
It's resistance. And that term resistance that he gives us is very helpful if we can relate to it that way. Okay, just a little more and then we'll close. We're just about at the end of this chapter. Best remedies for evil thoughts. When the mind is vacant, evil thoughts will try to enter. Again, what is evil thought? We've said materialist thought, thoughts that are that stick. Evil thinking is the beginning or starting point of adultery. Through a lustful look only, you have already committed adultery in the heart. Mental actions are the real actions. Remember this. God judges a man by his motives. Worldly people judge a man by his external physical actions. You'll have to look to the motive of the person, then you will not be mistaken. And of course, you can't see the motive of another, but you can see your own motive. Keep the mind, so the cure, keep the mind fully occupied, then evil thoughts will not enter. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. Watch the mind every minute. So karma yoga and such in the system is really about this. I would say keep the mind gainfully employed. And why would I think beneficial thoughts? So our dear Gopala took this practice, and such a great concept he has, which is, let me think beneficial thoughts as karma yoga. So I can share beneficial thoughts. Right?
Yeah.
And as a result, he fills the mind. Other practitioners hear silent mind is the goal, so let me quiet the mind. But if we're not ready for quiet mind will happen on its own to a practitioner. So we have japa to ajapa, for example, the one that's repeating mantra for years. Finally, the mantra steps back into the background and the mind is quiet. It repeats automatically. It doesn't require the conscious effort. After some time.
Keeps the mind focused on the mantra.
On the mantra. Keeps the mind engaged. Keeps the mind engaged in the mantra. You can say like that.
Yeah.
So, but any of the practices, we do the practices consciously.
Yeah.
And people will say, I just want to quiet the mind. And then we'll have a discussion. Okay, the question, we agree, the question is how to quiet the mind. Because if you can blank the mind for a while. But invariably, evil thought, material thought will come. And you'll find yourself caught up in it.
Without realizing.
Because we weren't vigilant about it. So he says, keep the mind occupied. And that's where we found that intentionally bringing beneficial thought for others. And where are others? Well, ultimately we can say no other, but in the practice, you don't want to say that. In the practice, you want to bring beneficial thought for the birds and the grass and the trees and the sun and you see, we're surrounded by life. So to all of the life forms. And why? Because then the mind is becoming very, very sattvic.
Yeah.
And very pure. And this purification really comes through an active commitment to purify, not through an attempt to be passive.
Right. Oh.
Right? We'll often hear that meditation practice, many of us that practice will relate to meditation practice as a time to rest. But meditation practice is not actually rest. If you enter it with the idea that I'm going to sit and rest now, then that's just tamas. And sleep comes and the evil thoughts will come and maybe snoring comes. But So in order to bring the mind to the place of quiescence, an active role is required. So that comes back to what Swami Sivananda is saying is when the mind is vacant, those negative materialistic thoughts about otherness and what are they trying to do me for, and what would make me happy right now, and what do I need, and all of that stuff's entering and not noticing it, how I hear, what do I need? And then I'm like, okay, I need more money. I need a new girlfriend. I need all this stuff that can come. I need different practice, a different teacher. Right? All this stuff. Whew. Yeah. So always engage yourself in some work. Stitching, cleaning vessels, sweeping, drawing water, reading, meditating, counting the beads, singing divine songs, praying, serving the elders, or nursing the sick. Even on the computer, don't be searching for the worldly stuff. Same things. So he says we have to keep ourselves busy. We have to keep the mind gainfully employed. Only then is sattva really able to take hold, only by intentionally cultivating.
And that's the beauty of the four paths the way we study, because there's plenty to do in the day in each one of the four. And that's how I look at it, Swamiji.
Right.
If I'm not serving, I'm studying. If I'm not studying, I'm praying. Or shavasana, meditation.
Yeah.
There's something for all moments in the day.
Yeah. Our dear Ashira, for example, she doesn't actually need to read any more scripture. But she does it in order to keep the mind in the place where there's only mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so she's always engaged in serving, in contemplating.
That's the key.
Mother and
you don't have to read much scripture, a couple of slokas, and then just contemplate on it.
Yeah. Well, and here again, he's very specific and it's very good. Always engage yourself in some work. Stitching, cleaning vessels, sweeping, drawing water, reading, meditating, counting the beads, singing divine songs, praying, serving the elders, nursing the sick. It goes on. Avoid loose talk and gossip. Fill the mind with sublime thoughts, such as those contained in the Gita, the Upanishads, the Yoga Vasishta, etc. One of the things that persistently enters with us is I need rest. And then we look for physical rest. But actually, what we're looking for is rest from ourselves. We're wanting this mind to shut up, but it's during these times where we release our guard. If we're not engaging, we're attacked even more.
Right. Authority sets in.
So, okay, we should close. Anything else?
So going to that point, like when you're sweeping or stitching and things like that, you could do that and your mind be in another galaxy. So it's
you could, but that's not karma yoga, Baba, is it?
No.
Okay. So
it's not the thing itself. It's not the action itself. It's the focus.
It's the bhavana.
Yes.
Yeah. But the bhavana needs a way to express.
Right.
The devotional attitude, the karma yoga attitude needs a way to express.
Right. So that's why you need it.
Yeah. So you need.
It all comes down to focus, one-pointedness on God.
Yeah. And it's to be practiced. It's not practiced in a vacuum.
No.
So if a devotee says, why is there the world, then the answer will have to be so that I may love the Lord in all of these ways. So that I may offer myself to the Lord in all of these ways.
Yes.
Right?
Oh.
Where a worldly mind will say, so that I may find happiness through the pleasures or whatever. So it's the motive. Yeah, it's the motive. But his point, if we try to relax in the old way of thinking of relaxing, then we're devastated. The potential is there to get hammered. Okay. We'll close. Final prayers and arati. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Amritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Amritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyama Amritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pasyanto Makashit Dukhabhat Bhave Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mritor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudashate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate Om Shānti Shānti Shāntihi. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto Thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold Thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve Thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember Thee. Let us ever sing Thy glories. Let Thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in Thee forever and ever. On below Sakguru Sivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all of the saints and sages of all the traditions. Okay, let's rise for Arti, and short Arti.